So just to update you on what kind of the players have discussed is they have agreed to a store credit split, but they are going to play out top 8 for the invite to the regional championship. And we're also hearing that this is a rematch from Swiss in which John won. So we brought up that John finished in the first seed. So I think that, they were both live. Ethan was still live after John beat him and then won his winning in a round that John got to draw.
Yeah. Obviously, talking about like being on the play being something we're highly in favor of. In general, do you think this is a good matchup for Niv, or do you think that Blue White's a little favored as we get started?
So I know that John has a plan. I've discussed the plan with John, and that John is comfortable with his matchup. And I do think that classically, if this is a matchup that you're not happy with as the Niv player, one of the points of the Niv deck is that you are the biggest mid-range deck. And so if you can't beat the player who is also trying to go big with their strategy, then you're probably not playing the correct deck. So I would think that if John's choosing to register right here, I would want to be on his side of the table.
Yeah, I think I agree in general. It looks like we've kicked things off with a couple of land drops. John resolved the carry tip, and now it's his turn 4, and we're going to run this Omnath into an absorb. Ethan's going to go to 23. And we're going to follow it up with a Fabled Passage from John. Very, very crucial to have the counterspell here. If not, this turn could have gotten pretty gross already with Omnath plus Fabled Passage, a powerful combo.
Absolutely.
As far as on Ethan's side of the table, we're saying John should be pretty comfortable with his match and has a plan. What are we looking for on the blue-white side? I mean, so far it looks like the game's in a pretty good spot where our opponent's only resolved one spell and it's a 0-3.
So yeah, so I do really one thing I will say is when I played blue-white in this format, I really liked fitting as many Wandering Emperors as I can in my deck, and Ethan has 4. And that is one of these turns where maybe John doesn't have a threat, or Ethan decides that he can deploy a Wandering Emperor through the threat that John has deployed. That's a good way to start attacking the game and just close the door before John can take over with a lot of his larger cards.
Mm-hmm. Looks like John's decided to run out of Fabled Mirror, which has just resolved. And I don't know, are we in the end step here, or did Ethan draw his card yet? Although John misses land drop, so we know he's sitting on 4 spells.
Yeah.
The reasonable place to be.
So it looks like
we're in Ethan's main phase. I
okay.
think. He's thinking about how he wants to approach the situation. Fable, a card that's particularly good in this matchup, lets you get rid of some of your situational cards, removal spells that aren't lining up particularly well. It's just 2 bodies, but they're spaced out in such a way that they don't really, it's hard to line up Verdict to trade because the treasures from the Goblin Shaman are so threatening that like you're pressured into killing it earlier, potentially, and prevents you from being able to make a clean 1-for-1 answer with it, other than just countering it on the way down. And since that didn't happen, I feel like John's got to feel like he's in an okay spot.
Absolutely. And so we saw Ethan spend an absorb with 3 mana, and then didn't play anything.
He played 4th land, and then John played Fable. And I don't know if this is still John's main phase, and he's just resolved this Fable, and especially no, Ethan did not play a land. We're going back to John's.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay, trigger the Fable. See if we got any cards at all. It looks like there's a carry tid that's probably going to get pitched, and that's it. It's just 1 carry tid for 1 new card. At this point, carry tid mostly worse than a land. So. John has a Niv in his hand. He drew a Hallowed Fountain off the carry. He's going to go to combat, make his treasure with his Goblin Shaman. Ethan declining to play Wandering Emperor in combat here so that he can potentially counterspell John's post-combat play, which I highly respect. It lets you do that, and if John declines to do anything, you can just run out the Wandering Emperor. You'll take 2 damage and your opponent gets a treasure, but gives you a lot of flexibility. Your mana. Also see a Teferi in hand, meaning Ethan's really looking for that 5th land so he can start trying to pull away.
Yeah.
John's going to tap out for a Niv. And
Which, if it resolves, usually means
some
lots
bad
of
things.
cards.
So
Yeah.
Vanishing Verse, Cull against commands. Yeah.
So
just two.
yeah.
And Verse is not the strongest card, but K command is pretty hard to recover from, especially because we missed our land drop. We're pretty far away from finding like a farewell to exile the graveyards.
Yeah.
And kind of this board kind of demands a sweeper at the moment. I don't think just killing the Niv is going to be enough here.
And I like in this matchup, like you said, we're demanding a sweeper. Niv being a 5-mana 6/6 is definitely worth a card in the matchup. And then it drew 2 other good cards. And like Vanishing Verse is still gonna exile this Emperor or Samurai if it's relevant. So it's just kind of hard to play.
Looks like we've elected to exile the token. John's responded by casting the Vanishing Verse off the treasure and the Caryatid to exile the Wandering Emperor while Ethan's tapped out. And now Ethan's got all of his mana available again. And the problem here is I don't think if you find a land you can play like Teferi Tuck, because the Teferi just dies to the K command.
Right.
And I don't think you can let your opponent hit you for 6 with an Invisit and untap with all of their cards in play. So we're going to shock in this Hallowed Fountain going down to 19. One of the problems with the blue-white deck in this format is it doesn't really have the best instant speed spot removal. I mean, we could have March or we could have Faithful Absence here, but you don't really want a Faithful Absence. An Invisit gives your opponent a clue. March is going to cost you a lot of cards to exile a 5-drop for 2 mana. Looks like we're going to play Teferi. We are going to minus, and we're going to hope that the rest of the cards in John's hands are bad, because clearly this Teferi is going to die to the Cull against command. But if the rest of John's cards are bad, maybe Ethan can be set up to answer the Niv by the time it comes back down.
And we also know that Ethan's got a bunch of spells in his hand because he did miss a land drop a couple times. And, you know, it's clearly showing that that's tough because he has not been able to spend as much mana as John and just has kind of fallen behind in this game.
The other upside is John, like if John doesn't have another answer, he has to cast Cull against command this turn, which means he's not going to get to, he's going to get to rebuy his Omnath. So it's not like so bad for him, or he's going to just have Ethan discard a card because he knows Ethan's on all spells. But it does force this card to get cast here and then not potentially rebuy an Invisit or some other card that might be more problematic.
True.
So John's just going to select his Omnath return, kill the Teferi. He's going to buy the Orion, and he's going to say go, which is honestly probably the best we could have hoped for. Like, the board's relatively clear. We hit our land drop. You know, the Niv's not in, like the Niv didn't end up in play. We didn't like tap out for a Brink to Light or something. They go get the Niv again. And so Ethan is the second Teferi. So if this one can stick, we might be in for a game. So island, our land for turn, we're going to untap our 2 lands and we're going to send it back. So 3 mana available. What threat do you like to run up first for John?
So I usually, depending on mana, I was gonna say I usually like playing my Omnath first. It replaces itself. It like allows you to play all of your other threats if you have some copies of the fetch lands in your hand. But it also,
it's awkward because we have just an intermediate amount of mana where we can't cast a 5-drop and a 4-drop.
Right.
But we are going to have a Leyline Binding for 1 to kill the Teferi clean, and that's going to resolve. Which is not a good sign.
And that's that's the other thing I was going to say. It's also about whether you think that your spells are going to resolve, because our friend on the floor has here that John said that he didn't expect his spells to resolve earlier, which might mean that you just think that Ethan doesn't have the counter spell. But
it's going to make this farewell extra brutal when the Teferi comes back down. I have Ethan here at 17 and John at 22 from the shocks in the combat. But yeah, Farewell exiling everything, getting Teferi back, getting it Teferi plus. One of the downsides to Leyline Binding is just like every other O-Ring, once you kill the O-Ring, you get your permanent back. And this is one of the decks in the format that has ways to kill the enchantments main deck.
Yeah.
So John responds to the Teferi activation by flashing in another Leyline Binding to make sure the Teferi's still not in play. But I believe Ethan has a Detention Sphere in his hand, another way to remove the binding to get the Teferi back for relatively little mana. Looks like John's counting colors for a Bring to Light here or a Niv Mizzet. There's the Niv Mizzet that was tucked, and that's going to resolve. So Vanishing Verse, Valky and can't get. Wandering Mind, another excellent card in the matchup. Just a creature that needs to get killed at some point that draws a card. And it draws a good card.
Yep.
Most of the time.
Exactly.
And I think we're going to get to this point where if John keeps hitting these cards that draw cards, he's going to keep presenting boards that need to be answered every turn by Ethan. Ethan's going to tap out to answer them, and then John's going to keep refilling his hand and making boards that can't be answered. And I think eventually, if Ethan can't stick the Teferi in play, he's just going to run out of cards.
And I see another binding in John's hand there. So it's very efficient to be playing the Detention Sphere, answering the binding, and then getting your Teferi back. But if John just keeps having the answer over and over again, then Ethan's not getting traction in the game.
Sure. I mean, I don't think you have much of another choice. Obviously.
Right. True.
Yeah, shocking in another Hallowed Fountain going down to 15 here. The other downside about this matchup is while you would think might be able to do some damage disruption with the Field of Ruins, John just has like 5 basics in his deck. And once you get past like 4 or 5 lands, it's really hard to disrupt their mana.
Yep.
So a weird stable mana gaze against Field of Ruin, even though we're playing 5 colors and a pile of Triumphant Shocks.
Yep.
So Ethan's just going to play his Field of Ruin and pass. I believe he's going to try to line up a Wandering Emperor to kill this Niv Mizzet. Maybe he can smell the Leyline Binding. He's going to try to get some value with the Detention Sphere.
I don't know. I think John's going to keep that binding in his hand.
I would agree. I don't think binding is going to be the card he's going to use to answer Wandering Emperor. I think he's going to prioritize using Vanishing Verse whenever he has a target. So here's the Wandering Emperor. We're going to exile the Niv Mizzet. Ethan's going to gain life and go to 17. You know what it is? It is 19. I missed the first 2 life off the first ever activation. Good catch. Good catch. Thank you. I felt like I was wrong, but I was like, have it written down in front. So now what do you do? Post combat, got some options. It's looking
like you said, there's just kind of a clunky number of mana to be deploying 2 large threats together. Kind of need one of the smaller threats like Fable or something like that to be.
Death Ray Shaman either.
Yeah.
I haven't seen one of those yet. So just going to be a Bring to Life for 5. Carefully counting out to make sure we have all colors of mana to converge. That also resolves. I think John's probably just going to get another Niv Mizzet. I don't see why. It seems like the best thing to get in this matchup. Like Valky is vulnerable to getting removed, and particularly with Valky, if it gets Leyline Binding as Tibalt, it only comes back as Valky because of how the double-face cards interact when leaving the battlefield.
It's also not really removing the important permanents. Like you really want to be removing Planeswalker with the card that you're going to get. For sure,
it's good once your opponent's out of cards because it's going to keep you. You're going to start drawing their counter spells and all this other stuff to stay way ahead of the game. But there's a lot of tension in this game still, so I think just getting another nice 3-for-1, lined up. We're gonna get another K command. We found a Death Ray Shaman off of that one, which is nice. Can deploy a second threat here if we want.
Saw John pause for a moment, maybe choosing to take Dreadbore over K command, but I think just wants to.
I think he's gonna just catch the Vanishing Verse in.
Agreed, and I think values K command over Dreadbore as just a way to keep recycling Niv Mizzet if it gets Supreme Verdicted or something like that.
It also means that again, if Teferi is not a clean enough answer to the Niv Mizzet if drawn, because we can just shock the Teferi with the thing and get another card.
Yep.
To reduce the card advantage. Ethan draws a Fountain for turn. Yeah, I think it's just gonna unless Ethan can't find an answer to the Niv, I think it's just going to come down to who blinks first, about who puts their enchantment-based removal into play. If Ethan can get to a spot where John has to play the binding before Ethan gets to play this D-sphere, it could be a pretty brutal defension sphere, but it looks like he's going to have to cast that sphere this turn to get his Teferi back. And that's probably not exactly what we want to be. Although he might try to get rid of the Niv. Looks like he's going to get rid of the binding. Take the Teferi back. He's going to plus. Shocks in down to 17. I'll go to an end step. Leave that field of road tap. We don't need that one.
No main lands over on.
Yeah,
on,
no creature lands in the domain 5-color deck, surprisingly.
Haven't given us creature lands with basic types.
I don't think John has a reason to put Lord Avatar of Windgrace in his deck to get some value lands going.
Oh man. Maybe though.
So we're representing on the blue side, we're representing that we have an answer to the Niv in combat, and that you need to kill this Teferi. I think John's going to start by trying to kill it in combat. Ethan has another Wandering Emperor.
That's another card that makes Deathwitch Shaman better, right?
For sure. Wandering Emperor's going to resolve. We're going to try to exile the Niv Visit, going to 19. And like you said earlier, exiling this card is hyper relevant against the Kolaghan's command.
Yep.
Currently John has no creatures in his graveyard to get back, although can still get a clean 2 for 1 at the K command on the Wandering Emperor if he wants it. Which I think is probably what I would be going for, and then trying to set up a binding on the Teferi. Just gonna start with a Wandering Mind to see what he can find. Top six.
That's a lot of cards.
And then a non-creature, non-land of your choice. Oh, and that's an Abrupt Decay, a card that normally doesn't have a lot of great targets in this matchup. But I, as an RTR standard player, I can tell you that it's quite good against Attention Sphere.
It's nice how those little things come back up when we're playing a format like Pioneer.
Yeah, just always old standard interaction. I mean, honestly, I think we might be time for Golgari Time Revolution. It has a lot of relevant modes right now. Very powerful. Going with Kolaghan's command, you discard Shock the Wandering Emperor, and then Abrupt Decay on the Detention Sphere, return the Leyline Binding, exile Teferi. All of that's resolving. But John's tapped out. So if Ethan has another Planeswalker or like a Shark Typhoonist land, it might be okay. That's another card that can run over this matchup. If you can't, it's John's been spewing these verses and these bindings on basically any target he could get. But Ethan found another Detention Sphere. He's going to Detention Sphere the binding, get his Teferi, draw another card. And does John have an answer in his hand to Teferi? Don't believe so. We have Deathrite Shaman and a land. And
Bring to Light Urian?
Bring to Light and Urian. So he can Bring to Light for an answer, but that's... You probably want to try to Bring to Light for Niv to keep the cards going, and that's a little risky because you could brick on the Niv ETB. Double Attention Sphere is an interesting choice. I think I like it with the return of like Phoenix Chick and some of the other like very linear aggressive decks.
And then the other permanent that it answers is Liliana of the Veil.
It answers Liliana of the Veil as a permanent answer. It also is good against the green decks. It kills Cavaliers and Trolls without giving your opponent access to the mana. Saw it coming. It's an answer to the Leyline Binding for 1 mana. Card was foretold last turn and now will enter the stack. John is thinking about how he wants to respond. He's going to go with a Drown the Lock to counter the Saw It Coming. Ethan has 4 cards in his hand.
Yes, I was
just
looking.
Just double check. Yeah. There was a farewell earlier. Absorb on the Drown the Lock. And I can't imagine John has many more counter spells. It's probably gonna resolve. The good news is he can resolve his Yorion now to get his card off the Wandering Mind if he wants it. The Absorb resolving is going to put Ethan back up to 22.
So then we're in John's turn, and I think he's just thinking about what to bring to light for.
Yeah, or if he just wants to play your end and rebuy the Wandering Mind after he does the combat.
True,
But he's
true.
gonna elect to bring to light for all 5 colors of mana. What do you think we're going for? There's so many options.
Yeah.
I think he's gonna go. I think he's gonna try to get the Tibalt into play. Attack the Teferi. Teferi can't minus and stay in play. I was just
That's
gonna
an
get an
visit.
Yep.
Yep.
I shows you what I got. That's why I'm sitting over here in Johnson.
I think that for what it's worth, I was gonna say it's probably just another minute visit trying to draw cards, and that's, you just want to keep them coming in this match. You know, you find cards that find you more Niv Mizzets, you find cards that find you more Bring to Lights, and
Dreadbore, Wandering Mind, and Deathrite Shaman off this one. So now the Teferi has an answer lined up for next turn, and John's still on the board.
and Deathrite Shaman just interacting in a very interesting way to necessitate something like a sweeper to clean up all of John's cards instead of
like if all these cards get traded down and John is with 2 Deathrite Shamans, he's still going to be winning,
right?
And like
exactly.
It's like the crazy thing about that card. Like it might even raise the hall that's in play.
Yep.
They're gonna attack the Teferi for 2, put him to 3, and now I think Ethan just has to draw cards because I think he just has to hope that his top cards are good. I don't think you can afford to minus with your Teferi this turn, and he agrees. He's gonna take another draw step, looking for a Supreme Verdict. It looks like he has one. I think you have to cast it here because otherwise your opponent won't have to cast the Dreadbore on their turn.
Right.
And I think you need them to have to cast the Dreadbore whether or not you have the counter spell.
And it looks like he's lining up the mana.
Yeah, and there's a Verdict. Luckily, most of the I think all of the Kolaghan's commands have been used before the Verdict. So now there's finally an Invis in the graveyard that keep coming back.
Yeah. So Wandering Mind, Urian, Deathrite Shaman, Dreadbore.
Deathrite Shaman, 2 Deathrite.
Yep.
And a fresh one.
Yes, which looks like a land.
But not even that unwelcome here, as we have a lot of mana to spend this turn. It's unfortunate that we don't have as many things to flicker with our Yorion. We really have to line up to make sure our Wandering Mind gets value here. That's kind of why I was almost in for playing it the previous turn, to just make sure we got a flicker out of it, even if it was like less value than, say, putting an Invis in the play, because it still was going to force a sweeper in all likelihood. And John's going to start things off with the Dreadbore. It's going to resolve. And a Wandering Mind.
Still has mana to play a Fable that maybe he finds, or something like that.
Or just run one of the Deathrites out.
Yep, exactly.
Again, pressure to have another sweeper. Play the Sacred Foundry Redo for turn tapped, and there's a Deathrite. He's going to run both the Deathrites out, it looks like. He's really going to demand that sweeper. And Ethan with 2 cards, third for turn here, is going to be hard-pressed to have the answer he needs.
Does have a little bit of time to find it, though.
Yeah, Portable Hole kills one of the Deathrites. Also, we're going to start attacking with this Hall. Once we're finally out of stuff to do, it's going to be time to start swinging for 7. And John's just going to take it, going to 15. Unless I have my lift tilts wrong again. But
those I talked about with Adam earlier, the addition of Memory Deluge kind of pushing Dig Through Time out of these control decks. But I think another thing that allowed mid-range decks and control decks to exist in this format were some actually playable creature lands, like Hall, like Den of the Bugbear, Hive of the Eye Tyrant. Like most of that cycle just kind of sees consistent play in this format. And the blue-white deck got their Celestial Colonnade for Pioneer.
Yeah, and it's better in some spots, worse than others, but like way less obnoxious than the original printing.
Absolutely,
and I like that they get to come in untapped for the monocolored aggressive decks to give them some more reach. I mean, previously, like the only real good utility land that some of the monocolored decks got was like ramming up in red and like a castle lockland in some of the black decks. But getting an actual like threat to pressure your opponent is nice. So second Wandering Mind comes down. First one's going to come attack. Got a Fable off the second Wandering Mind, and Continuing through the game plan, just cards on cards on cards. Ethan's over here holding one down, and very, very badly needs to find something to do.
He tried to find his cards, but John just wouldn't let a Teferi stay in play.
I mean, yeah, like I don't like I said, I don't think anyone's made an actual mistake. This game has just been this is how the matchup works, and I think John's just going to elect to try to resolve his Yorion here while he thinks Ethan has nothing to try to get his 2 additional cards, and that is going to happen. We're going to go to the end step. We're going to have 2 Wandering Mind triggers, at least another Fable in the first one.
Fable or Vanishing Verse, that looks like.
Yeah, I'd probably take the Fable. We already have a Dreadbore in our hand still, but apparently I'm wrong. Again, that's why I'm over here, and John's over there. So
and maybe we're just doing something like answering that portable hole.
Yeah, I mean, potentially. It's simple as that. Yeah. Bring to light on the second one. Yeah. And this Power of Companions also, like, this Yorion free card.
Yep.
did all of that. And our blue-white player is elected to not play a companion because of consistency reasons, which I think is reasonable, but this is one of the matchups where it definitely hurts. Cycle farmland.
I don't think that I saw any of our blue-white lists have a Yorion, and it's just kind of trended out of this format for consistency. The aggressive decks have gotten pretty good.
John's going to take that game, and we're going to end up going somewhere. But yeah, like you're saying, I think the big thing is that the way I assess it is originally when the format was less well defined and you needed less specific answers, the replacement level 20 cards you had to put in your deck was a pretty low cost to get access to Yorion. Yorion is quite powerful, even in spots where you're not flickering anything. Having access to a flying blocker in the blue-white deck is incredibly strong in a lot of matchups. It lets you sequence and play in a way that makes it difficult for your opponents to push through their last couple of points of damage. But as the formats evolved, some of the cards are not quite as powerful as they were previously. Like March of Otherworldly Light is not lining up the way people wanted to. Faithful Absence is not a card you want to put 4 copies of. You don't necessarily even want 4 Portable Hole in your main deck. And that means that it's hard to fill out those 80 slots to get to Yorion. I know people have experimented with playing Kahira and other companions. I think Kahira is a little lackluster. Personally, it's just too medium, especially given that your post-board games, if you're going to board in creatures, your opponent knows that you boarded the creature. Casually don't reveal your companion. But let's talk about sideboards. Start with John. Obviously, we have the Yorion, 2 Thoughtseize, 3 Pithing Needle, an Extinction Event, 4 Mystical Dispute, Lavinia, Azorius Renegade, Blood Baron of Viscopa, and Cabal. I'm going to take a stab at it, and then you can tell me I'm wrong.
All right.
I believe we're going to bring in the 2 Thoughtseizes. I believe we're going to bring in the 4 Mystical Disputes. I believe we're going to bring in the 2 Campbell.
I would agree with all those things.
I think he might board in the Blood Baron, as it is very difficult to be removed other than with a sweeper. And I think there's a small chance that some number of the Pithing Needles make it into the deck. Depends on how many cards in his main deck he doesn't like. But I'm pretty sure John mostly wants that card for Liliana of the Veil, as that's a really big problem for his deck. And has other applications past that other than some specific anti-Liliana cards that could be played a la Nullhide Ferox or other dodecapod type effects. But I would imagine it's going to look something like that, and some combination of the interactive spells that are least good, and possibly some of the caryatids on the draw are going to come out. But yeah, that's what I would expect to see.
That makes sense to me. I think the ones you mentioned first definitely coming in. Not sure about the other, like one of Blood Baron. I think John's pretty happy with a lot of the cards in his deck, as we saw. You just kind of the way that his game plan engine works just makes him very favored in this matchup, and he just is going to lean into that in these games. But I do like a lot of the choices that Ethan has to bring in, like these Angels that may be tough to answer, Elspeth, and the Starnheim Unleashed.
And entreat the Angels of the format, if you will. So we've got, for the total side, where we got 3 Rest in Peace, 1 Baneslayer Angel, 1 Lyra Dawnbringer, 1 Elspeth Sun's Champion, 1 Starnheim Unleashed, 2 Ether Gust, 2 Mystical Dispute, a Disdainful Stroke, a Brazen Borrower, a Fateful Absence, and a Veto.
So I like the threats a lot, like I said, and then I also like the random interaction cards like Gust and Dispute and Stroke. I think they just line up really well against John's deck, and I think Ethan will like having him in his deck after board.
Yeah, I think I agree. I could also see, I could literally see every card in the sideboard coming in except for SUs. Potentially, depending on what combinations of the subset of interaction spells he deems like least bad. I think Brazen Bar is probably the one I would definitely not want, given that you have this like angel threat plan that you're trying to go to. You do know John's likely to board out a lot of his sweepers as they're his worst interactive spells that are in his main deck. So the angel plan is more appealing. Although if John saw the angel plan the first time you played, he might end up leaving one of the sweepers in, probably the Selfless Cliff Weaver, because it's one that if you draw, you can play on the front side and it's like acceptable for the matchup. But I do like the Foretell plan. I like one of the things that when Kaldheim originally came out is I was big on Doomscar because I like Doomscar because it was a potential turn 3 answer to certain things in the format. And one of the things that's appealing about Foretell cards is when you play a mix of them. If you only have one Foretell card in your deck and your opponent knows you only have one Foretell card in your deck, it's just like morphs. And sometimes morph like Den Protector is powerful enough that it doesn't matter that they know it's Den Protector every time because it's Den Protector and it's really good. But other times it's important that your opponent has to play around a range of possible cards in PvP. So having access to both Saw It Coming and Startime Unleash, if your opponent isn't ready for Startime Unleash, which I would expect most of my opponents when I'm playing the card are not going to be prepared for me to cast Startime Unleashed, when I foretell my card, they will simply think about whether or not they need to think of when they want to try to play around the Saw It Coming. And when I elect to not counter their spell in some weird spots, I think it's a personal choice. I'm trying to save for a specific spot. If you're a Liliana deck or whatever, like I have to hide this card outside of my hand for later or whatever. And then suddenly you're staring down 16 power worth of angels and it's going to be very hard to win the game from there.
Yes, absolutely.
So yeah, I would be interested to see. I mean, obviously up a game, got to still like the chances for Niv and still like the matchup, but I do think that Ethan's deck improves more post board than John's deck does.
Agreed.
Ethan gets more upgrades. His upgrades he's getting are of higher quality relative to his original game plan, and we'll see if that's going to be enough to cross the line as their players draw their hands for game 2. Also, I am Team Ragavan between Ragavan and Crucible Worlds here, but
I think we would both be Team Ragavan.
Crucible Worlds is not a Magic card. Start things off with a Hallowed Fountain tap for Ethan and a Fabled Bastard for John, which he's going to use as the Evolving Wild mode to go get his basic tap on turn 1.
I will admit that Crucible of Worlds was an effect that I read and then questioned its cost when I was learning. And I don't mean like, like mana value of the card. I mean like
monetary value.
Right. Yes. Like I was just like, why is this a random artifact? So it's more than $50 right now.
Yeah. Another Hallowed Fountain for John. Ethan's going to cycle Irrigated Farmland there. One of the advantages of the blue-white deck is both the decks have a bunch of cycling lands in it, but the blue-white ones cycle for less mana, which makes it easier to convert them into other cards when you're getting a little stuck. And here's a Swamp and a Cannonball Council of Allocation. If this has to get answered without a counterspell, John's going to profit on the life total exchange. And given that Ethan's the one who's, in control, his life total is the one that matters.
Right. And we see there, Ethan has an Absorb in his hand and just didn't want to spend it on the Cannonball. It seems like such an inconsequential card that you don't want to spend one of your cancels on. But I assume that we're going to see it sit and play and trigger at least 2 or 3 times.
And I honestly wouldn't even be surprised if this Fable resolves, if John elects to just not attack with it and expose it to Wandering Emperor. Ethan is here going to counter the Fable, which means the Cannonball is going to not only drain for 2 life, putting John to 22 and Ethan to 18, but that clears the way for Cannonball to get sideways.
Yep.
And if Ethan wants to tap out on his main phase to play a Wandering Emperor to kill it, I'm sure John's more than happy with that exchange.
Absolutely.
Ethan going to have a 16 after combat here. And this might be a spot where you might want to try to Fable aggressively. 2 basics already in play. Cuts off green mana. You won't be able to have green and white necessarily next turn. I might have pulled the trigger on that Fable. Just the Field of Ruin.
Got it.
My apologies. Cannonball comes back in, putting Ethan down to 14. It's tough if you're playing as a Wandering Emperor because then you don't get to cast it, but yeah. Another basic for John.
Can be an awkward part of playing a bunch of Evolving Wilds and Fabled Passages.
Yeah, theoretically you draw them less because you're leading cards, by the way, and all this other stuff. Just selects to put the Yor in his hand, doesn't want to run a spell into a counter spell that Ethan probably has. Memory Deluge is going to trigger the ball again. John's going to go to 24, Ethan to 12. And, we're going to see if we can find a way out of this. What are we looking for? I mean, like, obviously, I would imagine the best thing to do is draw like Elspeth's champion, Sim it plus, and have your opponent not have an answer.
Yep.
That seems like a strong avenue to win the game.
But also probably unlikely.
You only have one copy.
And just unlikely for John not to have an answer. Still has
that
Dreadbore in his
that
deck.
too as well.
Possibly some number of Vanishing Verse, all the Leyline Bindings, etc., etc.
Yeah. Just a tap land and a go. And it's finally time. Channel an Iganjo to kill the Camball without taking another trigger.
Yeah.
Although that Camball dealt like 8 damage.
Yep.
So
I think pretty happy with that one.
Pretty happy with that. The upside, I guess, is Ethan still gets to have his absorb. So if he finally gets to untap with all his mana, he'll get to absorb theoretically a higher impact spell. An example of a reason he might not have done that is if Ethan knows about something like Blood Baron and John is actually bringing it in, he might know that he needs to have specific answers for specific cards.
True.
And that's a card that does not get removed by most of the spells in this deck.
Another thing that's coming back to me is that our friend on the floor, Dan, he shared that we had a mysterious Twitch subscriber, and I found out then later in a round that John had gone home to let his dog out and turned our stream on and used his Twitch Prime subscription to give us a sub. So thanks, John.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
And then another update from the floor. Kyle Gibson has beat Patrick Casey in 2 games. And so Patrick was on Mono Blue Spirits.
And Kyle was, I believe, playing Bant Spirits.
Yes.
So Mono Blue's out. It looks like we have a Bring to Light getting run into a Dobin's Veto. John's going to pass the turn. 4 basics in play. We're almost there. Everyone, hold your paw chance. We're gonna see Strip Mine. Castle Ardenvale and pass for Ethan. John has the second Camball in his hand. And it's just an embarrassment of riches, but so hard to sequence and play. This is the part of the game where blue-white is a little favorite. Like board's clear, mana development's even, Ethan's slightly ahead. They both have relatively the same number of cards in hand, and it's all about whether or not John can continue to start getting his engines going. So I'm going to lead off with a Wandering Mind. Conveniently enough, has mana to cast the Camball if this resolves. Kind of sneaky, though, off of a Forest, Hallowed Fountain, Zayator's Proving Ground. Wandering Mind's going to resolve, so that's clean 2 for 1. Obtained.
John's mana base is truly a masterpiece.
Yeah, it truly is. And there it is, a Pithing Needle. I'm not going to say I feel validated because, obviously the Pithing Needle is a relatively recent addition to the sideboard plan, so there's no way you could have known unless you talked to John already. But it does seem like an improvement over some of the cards that are in his main deck. So
absolutely.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, and you were absolutely correct that it's part of the Liliana problem.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, John was literally messaging me being like, hey, I can't find my Loxodon spiders. Can you bring them with me in case I decide to play it? I don't know what got named with the needle. If we could get a check on the needle name, that would be really appreciated because I cannot quite see it on this screen.
And another game update from the floor. Michael Ingram on, I believe, red-black. Yep, confirm that. Has beat Chaz Hinkle on mono green in 3 games.
Sure. John's going to pass. Ethan's going to cast a Memory Deluge in the turn here. The Needle is on Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, which is what I would have guessed. It was either that or potentially the castle, but I don't think the castle's that threatening right now. Second Field of Ruin. It's time, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to see some hot strip mine action in your area. I believe Ethan's going to do this on his main phase. He's going to kill both those untapped lands. Although tech play, you should kill one in your draw step. Your opponent doesn't have the floating mana when you go to your main phase to cast your main phase spells. Small advantages, but as you play, you'll learn some small timing windows. It's important to do things at specific timings in like 0.5% of the time. And the rest of the time it doesn't matter, but like sometimes.
Because especially that's the Naya Triumph.
That's the Jund Triumph.
The Jund. Okay, so as long as it's
or
not
it's a
blue,
Naya. I have no clue.
as long as it's not blue, it's very relevant because you could field the blue one, and then John does not have Mystical Dispute.
Yeah, so John's going to float mana here. Yeah. He's going to get a Plains because I believe it's the only other basic in his deck is a Plains. And then Ethan can field the Hallowed Fountain and then move to main 2, and no blue sources will be available to cast something like a Dispute, which John does have in his hand. And at this point, I believe Ethan should know that there's only 5 basics in John's deck.
I'm hearing that my story has gotten us another Prime sub, so I'm gonna try to find out who that is.
Big shout out to Shiny Dratini 27.
Ooh,
subscription.
Dalton, thanks so much, buddy.
Yeah. So here's the field, and I think it's time. We didn't feel the triumph to not do this. You know, I can't be the only one who wants to see Strip Mine in 2022.
It's even better than Strip Mine, right? Because Ethan gets to replace it.
Yes.
Nice.
It's worse because you have to pay mana to start.
True.
Yeah. Did elect to pass the turn. Here's an Omnath. Absorb. I believe the reason to not do this is this way Ethan can pay for a Mystical Dispute. So it takes 2 in combat down to 10, and then 3 up to 13 from the Absorb resolving. Shocks in a Stomping Ground for John to 22, and another Campbell. That one is going to get Mystical Dispute the hard way. All right, it's time. I think we're going to see it. I think we're going to see Strip Mine.
Cross his fingers.
I really hope so. I don't think I've wanted anything more all day than to see one of these lands get put in the graveyard and not be able to find a basic. Unfortunately, it looks like I'm not going to get my wish. I think we're just going to see an animation of Hall of the Storm Giants attack for 7, putting John down to 15.
I think somehow Ethan can hear us. We have multiple walls between us, and
I think he just wants to deny me the satisfaction of watching Strip Mine.
I think so.
All right, Wandering Line in for 2, Ethan down to 11. And you can see here, John's hand's getting a little little light on action. We've got a, Yorion here that if it doesn't resolve is going to be really tough for him to find cards to play for the rest of this game. He's got a Triumph he can cycle, but his mana is also starting to get shaky for the first time. Yorion does resolve, so you get to play our Triumph pretty safely here. Return our Wandering Mind. Why does it look at 6 cards? It's so many cards. It's also a 2. Why is it a 2-1?
Yeah. So I think I can't remember where I heard it. It was I believe it was a podcast, but just kind of this change in how they've designed these cards that instead of searching, let's make the number big enough that it always finds a card, and it feels like a search, but it also doesn't mechanically
have all the problems that
right clunk up the game. Yeah.
Second Pithing Needle revealed off of the same Wandering Mind. I think it's time to fire up Hall and in for another 7. And John's going to take that and go to 8. The good news is the cold name of Teferi lining up pretty well with the hand Ethan has here.
Yeah. And that's just John having played so much. And
knows the card he's losing to. It's also the other thing I like about Pithing Needle is that on turns where the Wandering Emperor is actually going to be a problem for you in combat, you just name the Wandering Emperor and then go to combat. You just cast your Pithing Needle first. So in for 6, Ethan down to 5. John's going to tap. Cleverly leaves the island untapped as to not get fielded off of his dispute, tapping the Hallowed Fountain instead as his blue source to resolve this Niv-Mizzet.
Man. We say it in the booth. It happens on the floor. Great minds. Great minds.
Also, shout out to Spicy Chicken 420 for their Prime subscription. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Killing it out there, people.
A K command, a bring to light, and a wandering mind.
And truly, like, if you want to see more of us in the booth, this might be the way to do it. Keep giving us your Prime subs, friends. We love it. Thank you.
Something like that.
So what did Nim Visit Draw Chase? I'm so sorry.
Wandering mind, bring to light, K command. Unfortunately, because John's at 8, even if Ethan has a removal spot for this Niv and John has nothing and the Hall connects again, he's still losing the race. So I think this might be the game here. And so I don't think Ethan has a sweeper in his hand to clean up this board.
It kind of looks like it. Ethan's taking a moment. While Ethan's taking a moment, and we're talking about Twitch subscriptions and other things. Make sure you follow Al Central Games socials. Got a Facebook, got a Twitter. Check out their website. Deals on there every week. Come check us out in the store if you're in the area. Pretty great play space. Friendly staff. Lots of stuff to check out.
Unfortunately, I don't think we're gonna see a spite strip menu then concede.
I think.
Oh, maybe we will actually. Hold on.
Ooh.
Hold on.
Has Ethan? I mean, that's a lot of cards that Ethan has. I
mean, at least one of them is Teferi.
Okay.
So, and I think another one's a Devin's Veto, which is not particularly good when you're facing down 12. So. I will have to complain though. Complain equity. John has 2 mismatched pitting needles. One of them's in English, one of them's not. And the rest of the deck's so pristine. It's just like feels bad. So I'm trying to think what we could be thinking about here. What's the card that, because like obviously we have nothing, we're dead. If we have sweeper, we would cast it. So what are we thinking? What's the card everybody's like, oh, Emperor? Can we live? If we Emperor exile something and it resolves, we go to 1 after combat.
Because the Hall and the Castle Ardenvale are not helping block any of these fires.
I guess the upside to the Emperor is if you have land Emperor and that's not a shock land, you can fire up the Hall, attack, put John to 1, and then Emperor to live if he has nothing. Unfortunately, I think John has a dispute, and that costs you all of your mana, so you're going to get your Emperor disputed.
Yep.
Okay. Cycle Shark Typhoon for 3. 3/3 shark.
Okay. So now with the Wandering Emperor, this isn't lethal anymore. Not through a dispute though.
Not through a dispute for a hard test. So
yeah, probably just looking for a sweeper off the Typhoon cycle.
Yep, sounds like it. So John's gonna take this match 2-0. Moving on to the semifinals. It looks like we still have one quarterfinal game outstanding. I think we're gonna take a quick break and then we'll come back to you with some semifinal action here from the Al Central Games Pioneer 2K RCQ. See ya.